Welcome to the deep dive. We're digging into a book you shared, The Sacred Charge, A Mission Beyond Time.
That's right.
And our goal, like always, is to pull out those key insights for you, get you those aha moments quickly, but, thoroughly.
Exactly. We know you want the knowledge without getting bogged down. So we've looked at excerpts from the Sacred Charge, focusing on its view of Christian mission.
Right, the history, the practical stuff today, challenges, strategies, the whole picture it paints.
Precisely. We're aiming to understand its core perspective.
Okay, so it seems the book starts with this pretty foundational idea, right? The Christian mission isn't like just another item on a to-do list.
Not at all. It's framed as something much deeper. A living divine mandate, almost like the heartbeat of belief, as the book puts it.
A divine heartbeat. I like that. And it really centers on the Great Commission, doesn't it? Matthew 28.
Absolutely. That's presented as the core text. Verses 19 and 20, go and make disciples of all nations. The book argues this isn't just history. It's a sacred charge binding believers across time and space.
Okay, and here's a key point, I think. It's not just for the professionals, the pastors or missionaries.
No, that's a crucial distinction the book makes. It hammers home that this is for every believer. It's a universal responsibility within the faith.
And it poses that challenging question.
Yeah, it really makes you stop and think, what would it look like to live each day as if the Great Commission were your highest priority? It's meant to be quite personal, quite reflective.
It definitely shifts the perspective. So if it's this vital charge, how does the book say you actually do it? It can't just be wishful thinking.
No, definitely not. It argues for intentional strategy, real commitment, and importantly, being adaptable. But underpinning all of that is this need for spiritual readiness.
Spiritual readiness. Okay, what does that look like according to the book?
Well, it really emphasizes prayerful dependence, relying on the guidance of the Holy Spirit. It points to Acts 1:8, where Jesus tells his followers to wait for this power.
Ah, right. So it's not just about human effort.
Exactly. The book suggests that's the foundational power source. Without that connection, you're just relying on your own steam, which is limited. Prayer is positioned as active, not passive.
That makes sense. Kind of like plugging into the mains instead of running on batteries. Does it give examples?
It does. It points to the early church's rapid expansion. The book argues this wasn't just good marketing or persuasive speeches.
No. What was it then?
It highlights Pentecost, that event described in Acts where the Holy Spirit empowers the believers. They see that as the supernatural fuel, enabling communication across cultures, driving that initial explosive growth.
So a direct result of that spiritual readiness and empowerment.
That's the perspective, yes. A divine power fueling the mission.
Okay, so for someone listening, how do they cultivate this? What practical things does the book suggest?
It mentions things like setting aside specific times for prayer, maybe spiritual retreats for deeper focus, and importantly, accountability groups, finding others to share the journey with.
So concrete actions to build that spiritual foundation.
Yeah, the idea is that the real engine isn't willpower alone, but a conscious, active connection to the divine.
Right, it's a different way of operating. Now, beyond the personal readiness, the book talks a lot about understanding the audience, doesn't it? This idea of cultural intelligence.
Yes, that's a major theme. You need to understand the specific cultural and spiritual dynamics of the people you're trying to reach. It's not one size fits all.
And it uses Paul as an example.
It does. It highlights how Paul adapted his approach. With Jewish audiences, he'd reference shared scriptures. With Greek philosophers, he engaged their logic. With Romans, maybe appeals to order.
So meeting people on their own turf, culturally speaking.
Exactly. And this is key, the book stresses doing this without watering down the core message. It's about navigating barriers respectfully.
What kind of barriers are we talking about?
Things like historical wounds between groups, maybe government restrictions, or just deeply ingrained cultural beliefs that might clash with the message. The challenge is to address these without compromising core truths.
How do you even start doing that? Build that bridge.
The book really emphasizes building trust first, through genuine, authentic relationships. It's not just about knowing about a culture, but connecting with people in that culture.
Ah, so relationship before rhetoric.
You could say that. When trust is there, the message isn't seen as foreign, but part of a shared search for truth. It means tailoring the presentation to resonate, not changing the substance.
Okay, that's a crucial distinction.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, the world's changed, technology. How does the book address mission in our digital age?
It calls for innovation. It says mission work has to be strategic and use the tools we have now. Technology, global communication, these aren't obstacles, they're opportunities.
So embracing the digital world.
Absolutely. It suggests things like social media, podcasts like this one, blogs, online courses. These are seen as pathways for the message.
Ways to overcome old boundaries.
Precisely. Technology can leap over geographical walls, cultural barriers in some ways, reaching people who might never walk into a traditional church building.
Makes sense. Use the channels people are already using.
Yeah.
Now, the book doesn't stop at just reaching people initially, right? It talks about what comes next. Discipleship.
Yes, that's central. Discipleship is presented as this ongoing process. Nurturing believers from that initial conversion point towards mature faith. It's about intentional mentoring, equipping people.
So it's definitely not just about ticking a box, like conversion achieved.
No, far from it. The book contrasts mere conversion with discipleship. Discipleship is seen as that deeper, enduring transformation. It's a journey, not just a moment.
And it involves mentoring.
Very much so. Experienced believers walking alongside newer ones. Guidance, encouragement, accountability, and empowering people within their own communities, too.
And it's a lifelong thing.
The book frames it that way. Lifelong learning, equipping people with tools rooted in faith to face life's challenges. It's about applying faith practically, day to day.
So faith becomes a dynamic force, not static knowledge. Okay, shifting gears a bit, the book also talks about the broader context. It uses battle language sometimes. Spiritual darkness.
Yes, it frames Christian mission as an engagement, a kind of struggle against spiritual darkness. It points to things like secularism, materialism, maybe false ideologies, moral decay, as forces that can obscure hope.
And believers are meant to be light bearers in that context.
That's the term used, actively pushing back against that darkness.
What does the book suggest are the ways to do that? Mention pillars.
3 pillars, yes.
Yeah.
First, uncompromising biblical teaching, the core stuff. God, humanity, redemption, transformation. Second, compassionate service linking practical help, meeting needs, directly with sharing faith.
Okay, truth and action together. What's the third?
Engaging culture with wisdom and discernment. Again, like Paul, understanding the culture but staying true to the core message. Contextualizing without compromising.
An integrated approach then. Truth, compassion, cultural understanding. Now let's talk about the harvest field, the people being reached.
Yeah.
The book doesn't see them as monolithic.
Not at all. It emphasizes the diversity. The harvest field is a living narrative of individuals, all with different stories, struggles, backgrounds.
So the call is to see the individual first.
Absolutely. Understand their worldview, cultural, philosophical, spiritual, before trying to persuade. Listen before speaking, essentially.
And it talks about spiritual strongholds. What are those?
These are described as unseen barriers to belief, often rooted in things like past trauma, deep distrust, maybe cultural narratives that conflict strongly with the message.
Things that logic alone might not overcome.
Right. So the book argues for compassionate engagement, building trust, trying to understand the root of the resistance, not just arguing against the surface points.
That requires a lot of sensitivity. And to navigate all this effectively, the book stresses awareness on multiple levels.
Yes. 3 dimensions of awareness. Cultural awareness, knowing the context. Spiritual awareness, discerning resistance that isn't just intellectual disagreement. And technological awareness, using modern tools effectively.
Why all 3?
Because effective mission, in this view, is about connection and transformation, not just broadcasting. You need all 3 to connect authentically and facilitate real change.
And there are dangers in lacking this awareness, pitfalls.
Definitely. Cultural ignorance can cause offense. Focusing only on emotion might lead to superficial conversions without real change. And ignoring technology means missing huge opportunities to connect.
So being perceptive, adaptable, relevant. Okay, to actually do the work in this harvest field, the book talks about a harvest force. What is that?
It's pictured as this multi-layered network. Not just the frontline missionaries or pastors. It includes intercessors, people focused on prayer, support networks providing practical help, cultural catalysts bridging gaps, and importantly, everyday disciples living out their faith where they are.
So everyone contributes in different ways. It's a team effort.
A very broad team effort, yes.
Yeah.
Recognizing diverse roles and gifts.
And what qualities make someone an effective part of this force?
The book lists several. Spiritual maturity is foundational. Cultural intelligence we've discussed. Strategic thinking planning, effectively. Resilience, because it can be tough. And crucially, collaboration, working well with others in the network.
A well-rounded set of characteristics. And the book mentions mapping active ministries. Sounds very strategic.
It is. It's about understanding what's already happening, Where are the resources concentrated? Where are the gaps? It's research to inform strategy.
To avoid overlap and target needs.
Exactly. It helps optimize resource allocation, build partnerships, and ensure the approach is balanced and sensitive to the actual needs on the ground.
Makes sense. Be smart about the effort. Now, tying back to that spiritual warfare idea,
Mm.
how does that play out in the actual work, the research and mission?
The book suggests even the research and planning happen on this battlefield. It talks about potential informational obfuscation, attempts to cloud the truth or mislead.
So like propaganda against the mission.
Something like that, which is why it stresses spiritual discernment, needing to see beyond the surface, understand the underlying dynamics.
And are there other obstacles mentioned in this context?
Yes, it uses the term strategic starvation. This could be things like intentionally limiting funding, creating logistical hurdles, or restricting technology access to try and derail the mission.
Wow, okay. So how do you counter that?
Resilience is key. Maintaining personal well-being, spiritual, emotional, physical. Strong support networks are vital. And interestingly, learning to see challenges not just as roadblocks, but potentially as catalysts for new creative solutions.
Turning setbacks into opportunities. That's a powerful idea. But what happens, according to the book, if this whole mission is neglected? What are the consequences?
The book paints a pretty stark picture of spiritual neglect. It describes it as a systemic failure that essentially leaves people in darkness.
Leading to what?
Things like unseen captivity, internal struggles, isolation, lack of hope, societal decay, erosion of values, fragmentation, and the entrenchment of falsehood when truth isn't actively promoted.
And it contrasts this with a kind of inward-looking approach.
Yes, it criticizes a fortress mentality, where a faith community just circles the wagons and focuses internally. It argues this leads to stagnation and ultimately betrays the outward-focused mission. Engagement is presented as necessary.
So withdrawal isn't the answer, active participation is. And that ties into the idea of illumination.
Exactly. Illumination is presented as this blend, spiritual wisdom plus intellectual rigor, knowledge and strategic insight working together.
And this illumination has power.
Transformative power, the book argues, for individuals, for communities. It brings understanding, enables action, fuels hope. It even mentions systems thinking, understanding how communities work, addressing root causes, not just symptoms.
Being spiritually wise and street smart, in a way.
Yeah.
Okay, so the book seems to build towards a strong call to action at the end. The forged steel of faith.
Yes, that's the final thrust. The core message there is that real transformation isn't comfortable. It requires enduring difficulty, stepping out of comfort zones.
And there's an urgency to it.
A definite urgency of now. It calls for immediate, impactful action, especially seeing a world searching for meaning. Inaction, it argues, has a cost of hope. Hope erodes. Injustice is implicitly accepted.
So what drives this action?
Conviction. The catalyst of conviction, it calls it. That's the engine. And forging the steel is about preparation through knowledge, continuous learning, collaboration.
And it comes back to the individual.
Yes, personal accountability.
Yeah.
Every believer's responsibility to be a light bearer using their unique gifts. It stresses strategic engagement, innovation, finding ways over, under, or through barriers to bring change.
Wow. It's quite a comprehensive and demanding vision.
Yeah.
So wrapping up our deep dive into the sacred charge, we've touched on the Great Commission as this core mandate.
Right, and the need for spiritual readiness, cultural smarts, innovation, deep discipleship.
Navigating spiritual challenges, the dangers of neglect, and then this power of illumination leading to decisive faith-fueled action.
Hopefully weaving through those themes has given you, listening, that quick but solid grasp you were after, maybe sparked some aha moments along the way. Perhaps the emphasis on, say, cultural intelligence or the broad network of the harvest force stood out.
Absolutely. And maybe just a final thought to chew on, building on all this. Which specific piece of this complex mission picture, maybe it's the personal readiness, maybe the cultural engagement, maybe the call to innovate, or even that sense of urgency, which part resonates most with you right now? And how might you explore that aspect a bit more in your own life, your own context?
A great question to leave things on.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.